Wheel of Genre, the show for readers whose taste in lit is so cooked it just falls right off the bone. Each week we spin the wheel and land on a new genre. Spies, mysteries, horror, romance, SF, it's all on the shelf. And right now we are reading every short story in Harlan Ellison's anthology, Dangerous Visions. This time we got Sonya Dorman's Go, 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 said the bird. I'm Zach, and this week I'm really interested in how this story was packaged by all the people commenting on it, namely Harlan Ellison, and how to really interpret what he's saying.
I'm Bob. I am so on board for Dangerous Visions now. I know I've said some disparaging things before, but I think Dangerous Visions is a blast, and this story I thought was great. What I'm interested in is what Sonya Dorman says in the foreword. She says, "I like speculative fiction because I believe art and science should be lovers, not enemies or adversaries." So I want to look at that in a little bit. But first, let's talk about what's going on in the story. It is a strange, it's constructed in a weird way. Weird things are going on. It is a very unique story. It's this woman who is running away from people who seem to be in her family, people who she's known for a long time, and they're all trying to eat her. It reminds me a little bit of Shirley Jackson's The Lottery, but here we have cannibalism instead. There is another interesting thing going on where there are, again, about the construction, there are little breaks of memories. It's almost like eating the Madeleine, but here she's being chased, and she tells us, look, I am the only one in this society who deserves really to live. I have to survive. I have to survive. And then it will say because, and then it's a colon. And then it will say snapshot number 1. And it goes back in time, and we see through her eyes another horrifying experience. And then she keeps running. And then again, she tells us, look, I am the only one who deserves to survive because snapshot 3. And then another horrifying thing. What else, I guess? What am I missing there, Zach?
No, I mean, that's it. I mean, I think that the Russian nesting doll structure of this is really what makes it so fascinating. It's also, I think, the most sophisticated literary structure that we've seen in this anthology, which I really appreciated and kind of wondered why more authors don't default to doing kind of interesting structures. Maybe this is kind of like my post-Christopher Nolan brained head. It's like, why isn't every story told in a really weird, funky way? But yeah, one thing that I like about this is it obeys the timeless advice that every writer gets, which is to start in media res. The story opens on the conclusion of it. It's the climax of the story. She's being chased. She's running. And then you might be wondering how I got here. Needle stop, and then you go back and back and back. And we get all of the background information that allows that opening chase to be meaningful and interesting. At which point, when we snap back to the present at the very end, that climax is resolved. Not positively, but it is resolved.
Not positively at all. This author is really interesting to me. So Sonya Dorman, she is known for speculative poetry, which I think we should definitely get into. But she is big in the movement of New Wave for making science fiction poetry. And here, this definitely feels almost like a prose poem, the way that it is put together. But I think the most interesting thing for me is, okay, so it's speculative because it's in the future where we have fallen so far that we're eating each other, because it's not in the past. There's concrete everywhere. There is like a dystopian setting that we can see little glimpses of, but it still feels very, very old because it feels like we're back into caveman days chasing each other around. But I think what is so interesting is the main character's insistence that her life matters, that she's very important, and that she's different from everyone else around her. I think this is my favorite quote, I think, from this story, where she says, she's running, she's being chased. People are chasing after her with knives. And she says, I can't die now. I'm not ever going to die. I am the only I in this world. She knew there was too much of her to be lost, much which could never be anyone else. And it was all precious and irreplaceable. Why didn't they realize how important it was for her to survive? I contain, and then it goes back to snapshot 3. I think it's so interesting to have a character who, in this dystopian future where we're just eating each other, she knows her memories are important. Reminds me of The Giver a little bit, actually. She knows that her memories are important and that they, having been stored in her, she has processed them in a special way. And even though she's just suffering, she knows she's important. I don't know. Even though she's not named or we've forgotten her name, what do you think about this character?
Well, I read it almost ironically, I guess I would say, in the sense that her self-appraisal as being all important, as being the most important I in this world, it really, well, I mean, our first question is that true? Is that a true statement? But she feels this way, but her entire lifestyle up until now has been eating everyone else. You know, she's not any different than any of these other cannibals. It just happens to be her time on the skillet. So there's a sense in which it feels like it's solipsistic a little bit, like she's the only person who matters. I can't be eaten. But then there's also this kind of like, I don't know, like I've never tried to, get into the psychology of cannibalism, but, there does seem to be this element of like, if you're going to devour another person, there's something about your self-appraisal that makes you think that your I is more than theirs. Like you could possibly even, in a Walt Whitman-esque "I contain multitudes" kind of way, you can contain these other people. You can contain the world within you. I don't know. Yeah, I thought her perspective was funny. I mean, there's no other way to put it. It was like a funny. Her reason for wanting to survive was funny to me.
Let's look at this. When you were saying that containing multitudes by eating other people, I thought, wow, an even darker Bene Gesserit. But I don't know if it's funny. So I think we can assume maybe she's eaten people because this society has been going on for a while. It said that she is the daughter of a headman and the wife of a headman. So it seems that there is this structure of eating people, chasing people down. And I think you're right. It is just her time. But we don't know for sure if she's ever eaten anyone, as far as I remember.
They are ambiguous about that, but yeah. I do feel like because they start off the snapshots with being like, "Oh, we're eating deer. It's the post-apocalypse," and then at some point it turns into, "Oh, we're eating babies." We're pulling a Cormac McCarthy. I get the sense that it would defy my understanding of famine if she wasn't also participating in it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and defy, I guess, what's set up in the world too, what we're already what we've been taught in the story to know. So she's probably eating people, but she's got a terrible life. I mean, all of these snapshots are someone trying to kill her, someone trying to rape her. Her husband kills her baby because it's not sufficient, and then burns it right after she gives birth. It's all of these horrifying things. So even though it is a little bit solipsistic with she's the only one that matters, there's still, I don't know, it feels like she knows that she can remember things and these other people can't. I'm sure that they can, but they don't seem to care about their memories. There's something important about, no, I guess she's just trying to survive. But here, I want to look at what she says in the afterword. I think what Dorman says in the afterword is really interesting too. She says, "Perhaps I wrote the story because sometimes that's the way the world seems, or perhaps I hope that when my daughter's generation grows up, it won't need or want to run for its life. Or perhaps because in the 17th century, Jeremy Taylor wrote, when it is inquired whether such a person be a good man or no, the meaning is not what does he believe or what does he hope, but what he loves." I wonder if she is... she's the only woman character that we see in this. Everyone else is a man, and they're just doing violent things all around her, and she's a woman trying to survive. I wonder if also she knows there's something important about being a woman in this terrible, terrible future, and she's trying to keep herself alive for that reason too. Hard to say.
There is the older lady at the start who goes, "Hey,
yes,
chickie," which I loved as a kind of double entendre of like chick girl and like chicken. Yeah, she obviously wants to eat her.
Cannibal jokes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So speaking of I guess, you brought up the feminine. Being a feminine writer is how Harlan Ellison frames Sonya Dorman. He says that she is, quote, well, he basically says that she's a feminine writer with the strengths of male writing, which, the joy of Harlan Ellison is that frequently he says things that I think to myself, wow, like this is totally outside of my kind of like framework of how I view the world. It feels extremely foreign to me to look at any text and just be like, oh, this is woman writing or this is man writing, But I tried to be charitable to him, and I was trying to think about what he was going for with that. And, she has that very poetic sentence structure. There's a lot of great images in here. There's also that really interesting structure. So maybe what he meant is that she has a literary style, but she's also depicting amoral and violent things. That's kind of what I understood by it. I agree, disagree?
I think that's really interesting because he compares her also to Carol Emshwiller, I think was her name, did the Malley system. But I don't think that he says she has the strength of man's writing style. He says that she's a feminine writer and her style is also feminine. And there are women writers who write like a man. He is doing, he's kind of being a little bit weird. But I like what he says at the end when he says her writing, it deals with reality in the unflinching way women will deal with it when they are no longer shucking themselves or those watching. And I submit it is all the more teeth-clenching for the relentless truth it proffers. So I think he's saying there's something special in her writing that is something, I guess, a male writer or a masculine writer wouldn't notice, but she would notice it. Her style is not necessarily feminine or masculine, but there's something, her perception of the world and of speculative fiction is feminine because a man might not even pay attention to what she's writing about.
I think thinking about like how to compare this to anything else, how can we pick apart how this is different than other post-apocalyptic fictions that we've read? We've read together Philip K. Dick and Roger Zelazny's Deus Irae, which to me was kind of like a more like a how would you describe that? Like a
romp
fantastical
through an apocalypse.
It was a romp, yeah. More recently, we read David R. Bunch's Incident at Motoran, which I loved, but that was also that was kind of bleak with a sad smile, if that makes sense. I guess if I were to take those two and compare them to this, I would say that both of those in their own way kind of played the whole post-apocalyptic thing for laughs. Whereas this one doesn't really play it for laughs at all. It just gives you ceaseless, unending tragedy after ceaseless, unending tragedy, it doesn't try to like sugarcoat it or indulge in like the fantasy of what it would be like at all.
Yeah, so it's not speculative fiction for a joke, for a punchline. It's speculative fiction for, I guess, looking at horrors. When we read so long ago, but the story about reproducing organs, and the author was Niven was very concerned about that, potentially happening, and saying, look, this is a warning, we need to think about this. This seems like it could be similar too. I guess if we let society fall so far that it just becomes chasing each other down and eating each other, or tempting each other, tempting the chicken into your house so you can cook that person and eat them. Will we get to that point? How do we avoid it? There's no prescription of how to avoid it, but there is the warning. I got a question for you, though, too. So if this is a post-apocalypse and we're looking at speculative ideas of, okay, what are we headed towards? What should we avoid? I really like when she said that it's science and it's art, and that's what she's going for. What do you think of her expression of artistic science fiction here, and why is it important for science and art to be friends, not adversaries?
I guess I would want someone to walk me through exactly how it's science. I mean, I get how it's science fiction or speculative fiction, but specifically science. that I'm a little less clear on what she meant by that. But I think maybe the charitable reading is it's speculative and it's art. It's not just nuts and bolts in the future. It also has something of human interest, something that says something about the human soul or the meaning of life, or all those things, and also is speculative. But it's interesting because if I give it that charitable reading, I actually have to approach it with a 1960s brain, not a 2025 brain, because now speculative fiction is like intimately tied up and enmeshed with the great questions of human life. So, like, if you think of like the titles that have come out recently, Three Body Problem, for example, like what does it mean to be a species amongst other species with different kinds of cognition and environments that you've come up in, among the many things that are covered in that book or that series of books. Gosh, off the top of my head, like Annihilation, questions about like personal meaning amidst a kind of science fiction, weird fiction universe. I guess my point is I feel like today these kind of humanistic concerns are baked into SF in a way that feels very natural and very like it's always been there. It's been there so long, it's just water to us at this point. But I think maybe at the time that this was written, that was something that you had to be like, no. That's, and in that sense precisely, that's what we initially thought Dangerous Visions was doing. It's coming off of Golden Age. It's coming off of space adventure and opera, space opera and things like that to do human-centered stories. But to us, that's just the air we breathe.
Humanist science fiction. So Sonya Dorman bringing Dangerous Visions back to life.
She's clear.
I thought you were milking a cow. Whoa.
Well, I'm glad that for you, this really rekindled your fire for Dangerous Visions. I'm not sure if it 100% did for me, but I love a readable, refreshing story. So, if you ever want to plop down a Sonya Dorman in front on my desk anytime in the future, I will happily come back to her.
In the future, let's read Planet Patrol. It came out in 1978. It's 3 short stories turned into a YA novel. I think we got to read Planet Patrol.
Okay, can do. All right, well, talk to you later, Bob.
Talk to you later, Zach.